On December 12th, Disney Plus invites you to go behind the scenes with Taylor Swift in an exclusive 6-episode docuseries.
I wanted to give something to the fans that they didn't expect.
The only thing left is to close the book.
The end of an era. And don't miss Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the final show, featuring for the first time the Tortured Poets Department. Streaming December 12th, only on Disney Plus.
Hello, welcome to Fintech Insider Insights. I'm Kate Moody, Customer Strategy Director here at 11FS. Today, we're diving into a topic that sits at the heart of every successful startup and scale-up across financial services and beyond: how to build a high-performance product team. We talk a lot in this industry about customer obsession, innovation, speed, AI, obviously, regulation, resilience, but none of that happens without the right product team behind it. So, what actually makes a good product team work? Whether you're starting from scratch, scaling fast, or trying to level up an existing team, today we're unpacking what great really looks like in 2026 and how to build it. To help us, I have a panel of fantastic guests with me. First up, my 11FS colleague, Mel Stringer, fractional CPO and product lead currently at 11FS Ventures. Welcome back to the show, Mel. For listeners maybe who haven't heard your voice in a little while, maybe give them a reminder of what you do and what you're working on at the moment.
Hello. So yes, it's absolutely lovely to be back. And I'm really excited about today's topic as well. I am currently working with 11FS on a really cool bank project in Eastern Europe. And it's really fascinating because it's kind of a hybrid between, I'd say, greenfield, brownfields with an AI undercurrent. I'm not allowed to say too much about it, but yes, it's to target a new demographic and has been a mix of kind of market research, product design, some really in-depth data analysis. So yeah, it's covered a really wide range of things. And I'm obviously loving working with the 11FS team as well. They're so talented and the client's amazing. So yeah, it's a dream.
Awesome. Well, really grateful that you've managed to find a small sliver of time to come in and share your product brain with us today, and looking forward to getting your opinions as we go through the show. So thank you so much. Also joining us today, we have Alex Rivas, Director of Product at LHV. Great to have you back on the show, Alex. Would you mind, again, just any listeners maybe that haven't caught you on the show before, giving them an introduction to yourself and what you do at LHV, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So lovely to be back and lovely to see some familiar faces. Alex Rivas, Director of Product at LHV, as you've said. So I cover the three key segments that we have at LHV from a product perspective, which is scaling the recently launched retail bank, driving the banking services business, which is their B2B payments and accounts business, as well as SME lending. So LHV was originally founded in Estonia, recently came to the UK about 5 years ago and has been building the bank ever since then. So it's tremendously exciting. Extraordinarily innovative, very exciting place to be, and very product rich. And so excited to dig into what good product looks like.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, can't wait to hear from your experience and hear your perspectives. And last but definitely not least, we have Nicole Bianchi, Senior VP of Product at Chip. Welcome back to the podcast, Nicole. I'm big fans of Chip here at 11FS. In case, again, our listeners haven't come across yourself or Chip, would you mind giving them a quick introduction, please?
Yes, of course. So I'm Nicole, VP of Product at Chip, which is a digital wealth management app. And I oversee our full product suite. So the assets, savings, investments, more to come this year on that side of things. And the experience side, everywhere from onboarding, promotions, etc., letting our customers hopefully grow their wealth and live whatever a wealthy life looks like for them. I've always loved being in kind of the startup and scale up space. Had a lot of fun working in that space in travel before Chip as well. I'm really excited to talk about one of my favorite topics today, which is my team.
Awesome. Well, what a badass panel. I'm so excited to hear from all of you. So let's get into it. To kick off the discussion, I suppose maybe we should take things back to basics. You're all highly accomplished product leaders, but maybe if we start at the beginning, there's quite a lot of maybe misunderstanding sometimes about, what a product person actually does. Mel, if you'd come across someone that maybe hadn't met a product manager before, how would you describe to them what a product person does?
Okay. Well, I think product is hugely varied depending on the organization. And so in my world, in consulting and in sort of fractional product leadership, I guess it's any major uplift that the organization might need. That might be customer facing. It could be that they need to win a whole bunch of new customers. It could be a turnaround project. It could be internally, how do we re-platform? I mean, it could literally be anything. And so I think it's the, I guess, knife edge of change within an organization and all of the forensic organization and structure and everything that comes after that. So sort of you see ducks flying and they usually have a lead duck that makes it easier on everyone else. And I think that's what product is basically. You're like the lead duck flying into the wind and you're making it easier on everybody else in the organization because you're setting the direction and taking the brunt of the air friction.
I like that. There's definitely not enough duck analogies in fintech, so I'm really glad that we could bring it on the show today. Alex, would you agree? Do you think of yourself as a duck, or is there another animal maybe that you'd add into the mix?
A lot of the time I'll say like calm on the surface and, kind of going really fast under the water. But I do think, yes, I really kind of follow that train of thought. I think the way that I describe it internally a lot of the time is I actually see product as being the conductor of an orchestra, but then a lot of the times having to set in and drive the violin or play the tuba or play the trumpet at the same time whilst you're actually conducting the full orchestra. And that's how I always tend to conceptualize what product's doing, because I think product enables the strategic objective of the company. And I think that's the big piece. It's if you have a very clear objective at the top, very clear kind of visualization of that, product is there to then come and drive those outcomes, create the bets, create the experiments, create kind of the initiatives underneath that. And so I think a lot of the time, I think of it as how do we then enable those outcomes? And again, coming back to I always think of it as the orchestra, but then product having to jump into many different seats at the same time as then still conducting the full end-to-end process.
Yeah, no, I like that, absolutely. Yeah, and of course, I suppose just to give you your chance to input as well. So if you're explaining to people that maybe don't work in your industry, outside industry, what are the kind of key parts of your role that you tend to highlight to help them understand what it is you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the other ladies have covered is definitely very accurate. And I think what we spend a lot of our time doing is negotiating. So kind of like chief negotiators of the business. And I think that's because you have to work with every single department to kind of move your initiatives forward. So you're in this constant state of backing the customer, backing the business strategy, trying to find a solution that kind of achieves both to the highest degree, but also satisfying operational, legal, regulatory requirements kind of on that path to get there. So I do think that there's a lot of potential flexibility for what that role looks like in a different organization based on how the organization is actually set up. Oftentimes, to Alex's point around having to jump in and play the tuba or play the violin, if there is gaps, the product manager or the product leader is the person who has to figure out how to fill those gaps with what resource we do have in the organization. So yeah, I think the definition is very, very tricky to get right of how to define a product manager or a product leader.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Alex, I suppose, are there particular nuances to product within the world of financial services? Like, would a product manager in another industry kind of have a very, very similar set of challenges, or do you think there are components of working in financial services that are particularly unique?
I think financial services is particularly unique just given the regulatory environment that we sit in. And I think, you look at big tech companies, they can ship lots of features really, really fast, and it's constantly churning out so many new things constantly. But the key thing is in big tech versus financial services, it's a very different regulatory landscape. And so I think for us, we have a duty of care to protect the end customer. At the end of the day, we're servicing the population to ensure that their money is safe, that they're secure, that we are working the best outcomes for the customers, which I think in a lot of other companies, it's just a different type of regime that they're going to be under. And so I think for us, it's particularly unique because we have so many things that we want to develop, ship, and service our customers, but at the same time managing and ensuring that we're doing that within the right boundaries of the regulatory environment. And that is constantly changing at the moment. I mean, the speed at which also we have all of the advances, of course, with AI and all of the other tools that we can bring in and operate in, it's making speed be less of a problem these days. So speed's no longer the problem. And so I think now it's like, okay, we could work really, really fast, which is incredible, and we could be more efficient and we could do all of these incredible things. But at the same time, we have to find and strike the balance of ensuring that we're not going too fast, that we're going to trip over ourselves and ultimately get ourselves into a bit of mud and not be able to navigate once you kind of fall into that. And so we are definitely working in this very incredible and exciting time, but equally a very uncharted, unknown time. This is the fastest innovative time that we've ever seen, kind of, I think, ever in financial services. And so, for me, the constant battle that I have in my mind is, how do I balance speed and interesting, wild, incredibly exciting ideas versus then ensuring that we're doing this in the way in which is safe, controlled within the right parameters of the regulatory environment, and also ensuring that it's within the comfort of the company's appetite to deliver.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mel, what's your take on that? Like, how do you think people can strike this balance, particularly, with where we're at in the current moment in financial services?
So I have a slightly different take. I think, because I've also worked on some projects fairly recently that are adjacent to financial services. They kind of still play roughly in that space, but they're more on the kind of AI and data and tech side. And the way I look at it is I break everything down into atoms, and I try to figure out, okay, what are stable atoms? What are things that are not going to change? So that can be things like, regulatory parameters or your specific licensing or, just technical impediments that are not going to change. And then I have a process of figuring out what's relatively mutable and then what's completely unstable. And then I think by breaking everything down and kind of atomizing the universe that you're in, you're able to figure out where you can play, where you can affect change, what's the most expedient course correction for the organization. And I think those are true across industries. And I feel like tech and AI are able to navigate this space. So some, amazing companies that, as you say, Alex, are moving really fast. And I think we can take those learning into financial services as well, because I feel like some of the knowledge and context that we all have. I mean, I've been in financial services almost 20 years now. And I find myself thinking back, okay, well, in FX in the 2010s, this is how it was. And some of that is still stable, right? So some of that is still true, especially for institutional FX. But some of it actually can be rewritten because there is just an assumption wrapped around what I call these like stable atoms. And actually there is opportunity to innovate. So it's all about being able to cut through ambiguity and using your own knowledge and your own experience to figure out where things are not completely rigid and set in stone. And then to Nicole's point about being able to negotiate, you could then go to compliance and say, okay, given that A, B, C, and D are completely off the table, we can't do that. What about this, this, and this? And I found that if you go with this informed view and you're able to show what the fixed parameters are and where things are not quite so fixed or might be a bit more mutable, you're way more effective in negotiations as well.
Okay. No, that's a really interesting take, absolutely. I suppose, Nicole, so something that's definitely come through in the conversation so far, because everyone's points is that your product doesn't exist in isolation. Like it really, as you said, it is this kind of central kind of hub of the business. From your experience, what are the kind of key parts of the wider business that product interacts with the most? Like where does product work most effectively, or least effectively even, with other parts of business? What are the kind of key connections?
I think that you really do have to be at the heart of the business. I don't actually see that there's one department that you need to be closer with than another, because if you're going to do your job effectively, what you're trying to do is influence the strategy. So influence whether that's commercially or whether that's with your entire senior leadership team on the direction of the product, if you're lucky enough to work in an organization where you can have that product influence. But in order to to do that. That's at the early stages. So that's in the kind of discovery phase and when you're setting your roadmap and you're looking ahead. But as you move into the actual delivery phase, all of the other departments around the business are just as important and just as key to allowing you to proceed. So you might have at another organization outside of the world of fintech, your main priority might be influencing that strategy, that decision, that bet to go down that direction. And actually, once it goes into build, you might be able to back off a little bit and trust that can kind of carry on without you. But in financial services, you're then convincing your operational team that you've done the right steps, that they can operate the product, they have the right controls. You're convincing your compliance team, all of the decisions that you've made. Why can it be designed this way? Why can it behave this way? Consumer duty assessments, all of that kind of stuff. You have to work really, really closely with your customer services team to make sure that they're able to kind of support customers using the products. And then obviously the big one on go-to-market is working with your marketing team to ensure that you sell the product properly. So it's not specifically unique to financial services that you should be working with all of these departments. But I think the fact that you're constantly trying to convince and influence every single department, that you've thought of everything, that you've, managed to create a product that ticks all of the boxes. And then you go back to your product management basics of, is it right for the customer? And is this what the customer actually wants at the back of it? So I do think you really have to be at the heart of the organization in order to be able to do all of those things well. And so hopefully, if you're in a position where you do have strong product leadership or you do have a strong product ethos within your senior leadership team, this is accepted. And this is something that's kind of celebrated within the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. A question that we're frequently asking when we're speaking to people either like fintechs or banks is, what does a dream product team look like? So I guess it'll be good to maybe start to answer that question. We can probably continue to come back to it as we go through the rest of the show. So, Alex, maybe come to you first. It sounds like, as you described, LHV is in a really interesting position, having sort of started in one market and now moving to another. What are kind of those first questions maybe that get asked internally as people start to think about building this dream product team?
Yeah, I think it really depends on each organization, as Mel kind of said at the beginning, because each one has a different kind of ambition. Previously at Clearbank, we went through a similar piece as well. So I've kind of gone through multiple organizations of looking at what does good product look like in terms of team structure. I think if I take myself back to Clearbank, something that we did pretty well at the time was a very flat autonomous structure where we had in those more early stages kind of squad-based teams that were integrated with kind of the key individuals in those teams so that they can make decisions quickly. And I think that was really important. That helped build the European bank at the time incredibly fast, which I think was tremendous because we gave individuals the right tools, kind of the space to operate in and that end-to-end ownership. Naturally, though, that works in that full kind of squad where you're in isolation for some time, but then as you get bigger, interdependencies become larger, your products then become a little bit more interconnected. This is where then more of a hybrid model starts to become incredibly important. And so kind of viewing it as value stream alignment is, I think, tremendously important. Engineering teams, product teams, designers, data, being really in this kind of hybrid model to then focus on their value streams, so whatever that value stream may be, but then being able to then cross-cut across your teams. So I think for me, it really depends on the stage at which you're in your development journey. I think the hybrid model works, is as you're kind of in that scalability space because it allows you then to have teams that are owning their domains, which I think is important. Ownership is so important because the moment there's not an owner, things start to get a bit vague, gray. They're floating kind of in the ether and people don't really know what to do with it, which I think is tremendous. But then equally, I think you do have to have very strong kind of product leadership to ensure that those dependencies are being mapped, understood, I call it the horse trading, or your trade-offs are being understood across each team. This is where I also then think the way in which you set up your teams, but then the way in which you prioritize is so important. And so thinking about, how are you placing your bets every quarter? How fast are you failing fast, moving fast? Are you not? How are you aligning to your strategic objectives? This all becomes incredibly important. So of course, OKRs and KPIs to track all of this becomes your best friend. And being able to show your leading and lagging metrics associated with your teams is tremendously important. I guess the last thing I'll say, and I'll hand over to the lovely other ladies, is product is constant and it's constantly changing. And so it's not a one size fits all. And so I think this is something that I had to learn along the way is your product organization may make sense, the structure that's in for that year, and you are doing an amazing amount of work. And sometimes you need to learn to pivot and to sometimes make changes where necessary in order to adapt to the speed or the changes of the types of products that you're bringing on. And so you might have a very generalist team at first to ship kind of that 0 to 1 phase. Potentially bringing in specialists becomes really tremendously important as you're looking at scaling. And so I think it's not locking yourselves in and being kind of stuck of like, this is how it has to be always. I think it is, you have to move at the change in which your organization's changing and growing and scaling. And so where you start in that startup phase, going through scaling phase and maturity phase, your product teams are going to look probably quite different. And that is really important. And I also think making sure that your teams have multidisciplined understanding of moving people around is really important. So having someone in platform maybe move over to more of a client-facing product, that is so great because then you have knowledge across your team. So bit of a waffle there, but that's kind of my philosophy, I think, in respect to the product design and how we get set up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Mel, obviously, when we work with some of our clients at 11FS, sometimes it's about us as building almost a product team from scratch as a business scales, but sometimes it's about you've got like a product team that's in place and you want to evolve or change it. What's kind of your take on that sort of second type of product dream team build where maybe you've kind of got something and you've got to evolve it? What are the kind of questions that you probably need to ask there to move forwards?
Yes, in that second scenario, I think it can be quite tricky because, well, inherently the fact that we're there in the first place means that the organization has got big ambitions and feels that they want some extra firepower to kind of move them in that direction. But in terms of bringing a product team up to support that new direction and the ambition, I feel, the best product people I know and have worked with in my career actually were themselves multidisciplined. So they either came from design or they came from sales. Sales plus product is really strong, in my opinion. It's super rare, but really strong if you can find those people. And, engineering that's gone into product, those sorts of people, I think, in your organization, particularly if they then have, as we were discussing earlier, this sort of history of working in financial services, it means you don't have to spend that much time upskilling them. They're already able to empathize with different groups in the organization deeply. They speak their language. And I think that is massively helpful. And in terms of, let's just be real, like pragmatic, the most bang for your buck is going to be if you can find these people who've had these varied, interesting careers. They might have been risk takers. They might have started, entrepreneurship projects. I always look for those sorts of people. And often you can also find those people in an organization. So if I walked into an organization that we were consulting for, I would say the attitude of the people is super important. So somebody who kind of leans into the project, who's maybe working in an adjacent department, knows everything, has worked out all of the political tentacles of the organization, because that's another really important product skill. Let's be real. Companies are political, and being able to map out actually who the real decision makers are, not just on the kind of hierarchy org. I think that's really important. So yeah, I look for those people, like who's going to give me the answers that I want, who's going to kind of give me the side eye in a meeting. Like that's my girl, that's my guy. So yeah, and I personally feel that success in product is a small team sport. And this is a bit controversial, but I think you can do a lot with a few people if you find these interesting characters who've done a lot and can empathize with the other departments. And I feel like, around them you can find great tech leads, you can find great commercial people, great marketeers. A product marketeer is also super important, and it's something that people don't think is important, or they think product can just do marketing. It's absolutely not true. So that's my take. I'll stop waffling now. I could literally talk to you about this for hours, but I will stop.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. The producers won't let us talk for hours. So we're all good. We don't stress. I suppose, Nicole, we're going to jump onto a break in a sec, but I just wanted to give you the final word in this section. I suppose from your perspective, obviously we've talked about lots of the kind of key components to think about when you're starting to define how you move to this dream product team. What would kind of be your key questions? What are the key things that you're looking for the business to kind of decide before you can start to actually build that team?
I think it really is understanding the stage of the business, as Alex was saying before, and what you need to be successful at that time, and then being really honest with your candidates, the people that you're talking to, about what you're looking for. I think if you look to fill a checklist of all of the key product skill sets that are the buzzwords and kind of the somebody who has worked at incredible product organizations, but as a business, you guys are in a scrappy scale-up phase where that person isn't going to be doing that or using those skills, you're wasting your time. So being really honest about who do you need and what skill set do you need at that time. And there'll probably be a time in the future where the person you're hiring needs to look different than the previous person you hired, or even that looks different from the superstar that you have in your team who everybody thinks is incredible, because you've realized as a leader there's a gap that you need to fill in that product space. And so I think as a product leader, it's very, very important that you have that understanding of where is the business, what does my team look like, and what do we need at this time? And that can change, and it's okay if it doesn't meet a mold of the perfect product manager. It can be these other skills like Mel was referring to, where you really know that you can trust their commercial acumen, or you think that their background working on a specific product or area in a business was really impressive, even if they don't necessarily have the full product skill set yet, that hopefully you can teach and mold and adapt.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting. Okay, I'm going to take a quick pause for an ad break, but we'll be back really soon to kind of continue digging into this topic because there's so much more for us to explore. Okay, back in a sec.
Hey folks, David Breer here, CEO of 11FS. Here's something you might not know about me. I get a lot of people trying to impersonate me online, fake profiles, scam emails, the lot. And a big part of that comes from data brokers, hundreds of them, quietly collecting and selling your personal information. Your phone number, email, home address, job title, all out there and all fueling identity theft, scam calls, and spam. If you've ever searched your own name online, hands up, who hasn't? You'll know how exposed you really are. That's why we've partnered with Incogni. They contact 230 plus data brokers and tell them to delete your information properly and legally under GDPR and CCPA. Doing it yourself would take hundreds of hours. Incogni automates the whole thing and keeps working with repeat removal requests if your data reappears. I tried it, and within days, saw brokers deleting my data. You can even protect your family members too. Fintech Insider listeners get 60% off an annual plan. Just head to incogni.com/FintechInsider and use code FintechInsider. And yes, it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You'll find the link in the description.
Membership means more with American Express Business Gold. Earn 4 times membership rewards points in your top 2 eligible spending categories every month, including eligible U.S. advertising purchases and select media, and U.S. purchases at restaurants, including takeout and delivery. What are you waiting for? Get the card that flexes with your spending every month. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
Welcome back. In this half of the show, we're going to pick up where we left off, digging into exactly how you set up a high-performance product team, what tools do they need to set them up for success, and how do you maintain the success as the product and business evolves and scales. Nicole, obviously you kind of closed out the first half of the show. I'll come back to you to kind of kick off the second. We've talked a lot about, this might be a hard question, right? Because we've talked about how multifaceted these teams are and the variety of skills. But I suppose if you were starting from scratch and you were building a product team from scratch, what kind of roles or capabilities do you think are essential to begin with? Obviously, you might end up with this very diversified team, but if you kind of have to pick a starting point, where do you think kind of the safest places to start?
I guess going with the assumption that if you're starting from scratch, there's a lot of potential top-down decision-making that's already been made around the direction of the roadmap or the direction of the strategy, at least in the kind of short to near term. I think it's really important to kind of have somebody who is incredibly good with the stakeholder management and communication side of the role. They really need to understand what is the vision, what is the direction, what is the position of the business, to know what is feasible and kind of what the budget needs to be or what do we need to achieve. And then figure out a really creative way to come up with solutions to kind of move in that direction. So I think those communication skills and that really ability to talk to multiple people in the business and understand their point of view and kind of help bring that to life with an actual roadmap that has milestones that you can build towards and you can show progression towards, that's really important in the beginning. And then once that trust is built and once that there is trust that what the product team is doing is beneficial for the business, is moving things in the right direction, is showing progress against the goals and objectives, then a lot of those skills of like deep customer research, really digging into kind of UX and UI decisions, experimentation, those things become very important in the future. But that trust isn't given, or I don't necessarily even think it should be given by default to a brand new product team. I think you have to go through that stage where you really kind of earn your stripes, maybe, I guess is the right way to refer to it, when you're starting from scratch. And I guess it also depends on what your leadership structure looks like and who you're reporting into. I've been in situations where products reported into the CEO, the CTO, the CPTO, all of those kinds of combinations. So you just have to have a good view about what that looks like and what are the expectations going to be for the product team to make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, again, across all the points that everyone's made, it sounds like there's been quite a lot of different experiences, right, about whether the ultimate product direction is coming upwards from the product team and is sort of being signed off or endorsed by the wider business, or if you have a sort of very, CEO-led or CTO-led, like they decide the product direction at the top and it's about implementing and executing that. Alex, is there kind of a norm, or does it just completely vary depending on the organization, I suppose? And as you're if you're a product person coming into a business, how easy is that to kind of discern from the outside, like where the true orientation is?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the organization. And I think it really depends on how it's been set up, what kind of the overall strategy or idea, kind of what's been adopted. So I think, I've been through multiple iterations of CEO, CPTO, CPO, etc. And I think there's no right answer, in my opinion, of what that looks like. Every organization is going to have its own identity for that. But I think that the key thing that I think's been most successful in a setup is, irrespective of who you're reporting into, like keeping that aside for a moment, if the company has a very clear strategic goal at the top, so whatever that is, maybe it's being, the best savings platform or best, card provider or whatever that is, right? Like that, that strategic goal very clear, and it linking to outcomes. And the outcomes shouldn't be kind of your features on your roadmap, but your actual outcomes. Is it increasing the number of customers per month or by day or whatever that looks like? Because the moment you then have that really clear, very simple, very understood objective, product then are empowered to think about the initiatives, think about experiments, and think about strategic bets that they will place in order to execute that strategy. And it's very simple. I see strategic bets actually changing often. I think being able to come in and kind of break stuff, and product managers being able to think about like, okay, let's build this little prototype, let's test it out. It might fail, move on, throw it to the side. We've tried it, we've done it, we're moving. That for me is the special sauce. And I think now with the tools that we're being given and all of kind of the things that are really coming into the market over the last almost 6 months, really, it's been like this massive change. Products also getting closer to the engineering workflow. And so being able to then embed product into that engineering workflow a lot faster, this is then really where you're going to see that momentum. But I think in order to have the momentum, it is that clear goal that is being set. Now, that could be set by your CPO because the company was founded with a CEO, CPO. That's often. Or you might have a CEO founded, very clear vision. It's not a one size fits all. But I think the most success I've seen is where that is incredibly understood. The moment that this goal at the top is not understood, or there's too many goals and people don't know where to prioritize their time, and they're kind of like, oh, I'm hopping back and forth between multiple, things slow down naturally, right? And so I think it's being very, very ruthless about what you're prioritizing, what's the goal, what are those outcomes, are the outcomes actually measurable and achievable? Because if they're not, and you kind of make very vague and very kind of maybe overly simplified pieces, then people get confused as well. So it's really comes down to, in my opinion, the way in which it's set. I think product minds are the most adaptive, and I think they're very creative. I think I think product people are very, very creative people, which I think is the success is creativity equals really interesting new products.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. I can completely see that. Mel, Alex alluded to kind of tools as in part of her kind of overview. You mentioned earlier on that like when you look back on kind of your experience of financial services, like some things haven't changed, but I suppose what is constantly changing is the tools that product managers have available to them to kind of support their work. Like we haven't really mentioned the word AI so far, which I think is quite impressive. Normally I try and play a sort of like, normally not with alcohol drinking game version of like AI buzzword bingo, whatever, like Danny drinks every time someone says AI. Anyhow, that aside, how are the tools that are now available to product managers changing how product works? Or how do you think it's changing how product should work?
Yeah, so I think to Nicole's point about earning your stripes, if you had a brand new product team, and actually in my experience, a lot of well-funded or teams with a lot of backing now often don't have product as their first hire or their first, their founding team. It could have been like a, technical person that partnered with a commercial person. And so then once they've got the ball moving, they then think, oh, actually, wow, we need product. And so you're actually coming into a moving landscape and things are already going, and you may even have customers, because especially in financial services there are so many ways that you can connect partners together to create something that is fairly unique. And especially in the B2B space, there's a lot of subtle partnerships and revenue models and things that you can pursue as even a non-technical team, particularly in the crypto space and stablecoin space and FX and all of that. I won't go down a rabbit hole, but anyway, so that I think that is the most likely scenario, that the product team is joining a moving ship and they already have goals and targets and they probably have some partners and it's already quite complicated. And they've hired you at the last possible moment that their budget can possibly contain as well. So they're like, right, Mel, we've got 3 months runway. You need to fix this, and this, and we need to achieve our next proof point of this many customers, or we need to like do the X, Y, and Z to get our next round of investment. That's like a totally well-trodden scenario. And in terms of tooling, to Nicole's point, or to provability, I think you don't need to nowadays waste any engineering time. You as a product person can stand up something that is demonstrable, testable, looks beautiful, and you can just use AI tools to pull this together. As long as you can ask intelligent questions, you can use your product chops to sequence things properly. You're basically halfway there and you've not even touched engineering. And then you can get on the phone or you can get in the meetings and test it with real customers. And so you don't need to spend any organizational resource to do this. You can literally just do it on your own. And I think that also is like shaking out who the good product people are, because you need to be able to get something from nothing to demonstrable, yes, customers want this, before you even bother wasting any. Well, you're not wasting resource at that point, but you know what I mean? Like, you've proven that this is the correct direction and then you can just get going. I mean, obviously there are back to like my point about stable atoms and so on, there are things that need to be built in the background to enable a capability technically. So if you're designing workflows, or if you're saying, okay, well, actually we need our resource internally to be doing this and this, you can get people working on stuff that's super valuable. But I'm just saying you don't need to waste resource on the experiments now, which is amazing. And I think that is incredibly powerful for product managers, and it's incredibly powerful for gaining the trust of the founding team or the CEO or whomever you report to.
Mel, I couldn't agree more. And I think what's been really interesting is seeing product managers who want to work this way because they know it'll make them more effective at their job, rather than necessarily the pressure of trying to hire people who love showing off everything that they can do with AI. So I think some of the best product people know that in order to influence someone, having a prototype that is in your design system and looks like what you want it to look instead of something sketched on a piece of paper like I used to do, that is going to convince people that they understand the idea that you're trying to get across. They can see the vision and the future you want to work towards. Or if you don't have the resource of your engineering team who's knee deep in delivery to focus on discovery on something else, you're then building that prototype to then experiment with because you know it'll help you do your job better. And I think the big difference is not necessarily somebody who wants to spend all of their time doing those things because that's the buzzy, cool thing to do that's going to get you loads of money these days. It's somebody who wants to be a product manager and know that there's all these tools available to them to help them do their job better, more efficiently, more effectively, and get a yes the first time, if that makes sense. And I think that's been the biggest shift and change for me, especially when hiring for new roles and having these conversations in interviews and bringing people on. There's a lot of pressure sometimes inside organizations to work that into the process and have people kind of show off how they use these tools. But if you focus too much on that and if the spotlight is too much on that and you don't remind yourself that these people are still product managers and they still need to kind of embody what being a good product manager means for your business and for your customers. And I think that balance has been really interesting to see that shift over the past 6 months to a year.
Yeah, no, I can completely appreciate it. It must be such a dynamic environment and there's so much change. I suppose one thing that seems interesting just from this conversation alone, I hadn't had this thought before, but we've spent so much time talking about how critical it is for product managers to kind of be at the core of an organization, to be that connecting tissue, the leading duck, the orchestrator, the leader of the orchestra, whichever analogy you use, but it's all about kind of being connected to the organization. And I do wonder if maybe one potential thing to work out with new tooling is how you then mitigate the risk. Obviously, it's great that you don't create additional burdens on engineering, but is there maybe a slightly risk that it goes too far and maybe product teams become insular in a way because they start to do all these things kind of with their own tools and isolation? Alex, am I being overly pessimistic here, or is that something that you're trying to work out?
I think it's something that's going to have to strike a balance. I think some individuals in product are particularly good at showcasing what they've done, and they're extraordinarily excited to show across the organization, right? And go show their engineering counterparts or go show other people across the business. And then I think naturally you're going to have others who are a little bit more, I'm going to just try this thing out, kind of do offside a desk, it goes somewhere and it kind of gets lost. And so I think there's maybe two parts of this. I think one is, I think you have to kind of, as a product leader, ensure that you are championing, one, that product doesn't become its own kind of silo in a corner. Two, how are you showcasing, doing demos, providing kind of overviews to all of the kind of business lines across the company that you're at to show all of the success and the interesting things that you've done. Equally, one thing that I love to see is when something, we do a prototype, we test it out, and we end up not going ahead with it, that still gets showcased, which I think is great because people can see something that we've tested, experimented with, and decided we're not going to go ahead with that, and we're going to put it back on the bookshelf for now. Maybe we'll pull it out later, but for now we're going to park it to the side, which keeps the teams really curious, really interested. So, I think, Kate, there's probably no right answer. I think it's probably very dynamic at the moment, given how fast change is happening. But I think it just comes back to kind of the personalities that you have in your product team, how you're leading as product, how you are showcasing the skill sets that you're doing across the business. And ultimately, I think product for me, a big part of it is curiosity. And I think a lot people that I hire for or people that I work with are people that I love to have that curious spirit. And so I think that's also where when you have curiosity, people who are curious like to show other people what they're up to. And so I think that kind of mindset's really, really important to continue to kind of drive, because I think there's a lot of change. I do think product will look different in a year's time. And that will be a rabbit hole maybe for another day. But yeah, I think it's probably quite dynamic in terms of how do you keep it interconnected and not so siloed across the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm guessing probably as you seasoned professionals in this space, you guys probably get this question all the time. But I do also think it's really interesting given how much we've talked about how like being multi-skilled is critical to being successful in the product space. Like having maybe like a background in one space and then coming into product might make you actually a better product leader in the end. how can someone if someone isn't in product at the moment and is listening to this podcast and thinking I like the sounds of these problems, these challenges, but I'm sat in engineering or in a sales team, or how do you think someone can make that pivot from another discipline into product? How does that work, Nicole? What would you advise to somebody?
This is something, I'm quite passionate about this. We've had a lot of people we've hired either in kind of associate roles, just starting out, or where we move them in the organization. And I think there's a few different ways to kind of go about it. I think, first of all, being in a small organization does help because you get to know people a lot better. So you have more of an opportunity to get to know the product team and kind of make yourself known to the product team in advance. But I do think, first of all, it shouldn't be a surprise if you have a job ad out and someone applies from your organization that they're interested in product. I would want to know in advance, and I would want that person to have told me that they're interested, asked me to shadow, gotten involved as they could from their department. So if there's somebody in engineering or CS or operations, just showing a certain level of interest and making sure to kind of have high levels of engagement really helps catch someone's eye, and makes it known that they kind of potentially either have that skill set or show an interest in that product skill set, so that when a job ad does come up or an opportunity does come up, it's not a surprise that that person kind of is applying. And also, if you're applying internally for a role, you should have deep knowledge of the organization, and you should be able to kind of come to that interview with ideas on how to make the product better, or pain points or opportunities, and really convinced that you can learn the product skill set, but what you can bring to the table is your knowledge of the organization, your knowledge of kind of how you can fit in really quickly. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity to do that as an internal move, which obviously isn't always easy for everyone, especially if you're in an organization where those opportunities aren't coming, etc. I do think it's getting a little bit scary seeing a lot less associate and kind of junior level roles becoming available, especially with things like AI and the ability for people to kind of do a lot of those roles maybe more efficiently. So I'm interested to see how that changes over time. But I do think just really making it known that you want to make that move and seeing what you can do to kind of infiltrate and influence the product team from whatever role that you're in already is a great first start.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, annoyingly, we're getting towards the end of our time, because I feel like we probably all could just talk about this all day. I certainly could. What key piece of advice, Alex, would you give to a company that's maybe got a product team and they want to change it up, they want to kind of improve the performance of that team, they want to move towards that dream product team in 2026? What would be kind of the single key piece of advice that you'd give them to get started, but I should focus first?
I would say the focus on, is your goal of the company clear? And I think that for me is probably the most important, because then you can hire or kind of have or mold your team around how do you actually achieve that goal. I think where I've seen things get slow or challenged is when that goal is not clear. And so I think if that's set up, then, to Mel's point, you can navigate the politics or the challenges or kind of the fluctuation of change. You can then be really outcome-led of how do we just start to kind of get our head down and execute across that goal.
Awesome. Mel, what about you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I agree with Alex. I think having a really clear goal at the top is important. But I also just think that looking for unusual product hires is probably a good thing to do, especially if you're a super small team. It could be somebody who already knows your business really well, or my favorite hire at the moment, if depending on your budget, if you've got like a budget for a sort of junior to kind of mid product manager, somebody who's done something end to end, who's done an entrepreneurial project with real customers and can demonstrate that, and they've as much as we may laugh at this, but if they manage to vibe code something that has resulted in real customers, and they are able to go from zero to sort of proven methodology and output that's making money, I think that that's a safe bet in terms of hiring. And those people may come from engineering, or they may come from design, or they may just be super creative. But I think it's a good proxy for finding creative, passionate, driven people, which is essentially what you need in product.
Yeah, no, I love that. And Nicole, final word for you. What piece of advice would you give to someone that's looking to mix up their product team in 2026?
I think be honest about what you need in your business to be successful. I think that what you're looking for is going to be very unique to your team, your business, your size, your industry, etc. And just start by writing that down or thinking about the gaps, the weaknesses, or even what has been working really well and do you need more of that? And just be really honest about that. Don't worry about hiring to tick boxes that would please the kind of product purists out there, because everything's changing too much for that to stand the case of time over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so grateful for all of you taking the time out to join us today, sharing your perspective, sharing your learnings from this industry. I think a ton of really, really useful insights in that. So thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you, what you're working on, what you're doing, Mel?
You can find me on LinkedIn and you can find me on my website, which is melissastringer.ai.
Awesome. Alex, what about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I go under Alexandra Rivas Gale. That's it.
Awesome. And Nicole, what about you?
Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, Nicole Bianchi, or go to getchip.uk and download Chip and see what we're all about.
Awesome. And as for me, you can find me also on LinkedIn at Kate Moody or drop me an email, kate@learnfest.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you've heard today, please follow our podcast on your favourite platform of choice. And if you really like what you've heard, why not share this episode with a colleague or a friend or someone looking to get into product? As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or Fintech Insider or email podcast@11fs.com. Thanks very much. Goodbye.